Eternal life. Children. If there was one thing Rick Harper hated with every fiber of his being, it was children. Maybe it had something to do with his own upbringing in the New Dawn collective on Athel, but the fact remained. This principle even dictated his schedule. Never stay on one planet for more than 9 months. And on those worlds that had undergone the accelerated fertility program during the Great War, turning into assembly lines of cannon fodder for the Commonwealth, he was gone in 4.5 months, max. The second thing on his personal list of hatreds was his own death. The process was unpleasant, not to mention pricey. And Rick needed money. He loved his Stingray-class courier ship, which required damned expensive maintenance. He loved women, who fortunately were cheaper. Wine from the Qatarian syndicate, the delicate sense of Vex artisans' work, and those exotic pleasures of other races that the human body could stomach, it all cost money. And now both of his nightmares had merged into one. But the worst part wasn't that a child was about to kill him, nor that another child was the reason. It wasn't even the way it was supposed to happen. The real catastrophe was that Rick was late on his Continuum payment, and that, as everyone knew, was a one-way ticket. The hotel room was shabby enough not to attract serious robbers, but decent enough to scare off the small-time thugs. The kid, frozen by his bed, barely looked like he belonged in the latter category. It was a mystery how he'd gotten an electronic key and a null-field scrambler to bypass the alarm. The weapon in his hand was easier to explain. Agonizers, the favorite toys of sadists and losers, cost pennies. "Listen, let's do it this way," Rick offered, desperately trying to keep his face a mask of calm. "You lower that thing and we'll talk, like adults." The boy smirked. "But I'm not an adult." He really didn't look dangerous. A dark-skinned, black-haired kid of about 12 or 13. A bright pink shirt and short white shorts made him look like a tourist. "Look," Rick tried again, "even if you dropped a gun now." The boy frowned slightly. "Even if you throw it away, I won't do anything to you. You can see I see. I can't talk when a weapon is pointed at me. And why would I need to talk to you?" Genuine surprise echoed in the boy's voice. Mentally, Rick praised all the gods. Talking was good. The longer they talked, the lower the chances this pup would pull the trigger. It's not so easy to kill someone you're talking to, although Rick wasn't sure if that rule applied to children. "You're going to kill me, right?" he asked. The boy nodded silently. "Death by agonizer is the worst thing you can imagine. Trust me, I know." "You've killed?" the boy asked with interest. "I've been killed." The kid narrowed his eyes. It seemed to be sinking in. "So," Rick continued, injecting as much friendliness into his voice as he could, "since you're planning on trying this piece of junk on me, at least tell me what for. That's a small favor, isn't it?" "True," the boy agreed with surprising ease. He walked over to a chair by the wall, sat down, crossed his legs, and placed the pistol on the armrest. "Within my designated zone." "But you didn't land in the circle. You killed her on purpose. I know what you told the controller. I hate kids. These little whores are always getting under the jets. Many people saw your landing. You swerved over the field to hit Lily with the beam." The boy's voice grew thin, cracking, and Rick realized with horror, he's winding himself up to shoot. "I didn't see her, believe me. Why would I?" "Yeah, right. You were just dancing in the air," the boy spat with contempt. Rick choked on the lie he'd prepared. How could he explain to this slum kid that he really had been dancing? How to convey the weight of the neurohelmet, the bottomless blue all around, and the feeling of the weightless ship becoming an extension of your own body? The roar of the gravity engines, the streams of air, the intoxicating feeling of flight. Yes, he had been dancing. And he hadn't been looking at the concrete plain where a girl who had bribed the guards was waiting for his ship, hoping to be the first to run to the ramp and offer the cheapest drugs on the planet, or herself as a guide, or just herself. He was dancing, and the repulsor beam grazed her, slamming her into the concrete, turning her into a bloody dust, into that grayish-brown stain he saw when he stepped off the ship. Kid, my autopilot was acting up. I took over manual control, but the ship lurched. You're lying, the boy cut him off mercilessly. Everyone at the port knows your Stingray is in perfect condition. He picked up the agonizer, carefully took it off safety, and walked over to the bed. Listen, Rick said, feeling an icy chill run down his skin. I have Continuum. You can't kill me for good, you understand? I'll come back and do things to you that will make an agonizer seem like a mercy. You're lying, the boy hesitated slightly. No, look at my body. Not a single scar. People in my profession don't look like this. I was resurrected a month ago, you get it? The boy wasn't interested in Rick's profession, which Rick had vaguely hoped for, but he did appreciate the end of the sentence. If you were resurrected a month ago, you might not have renewed your Continuum yet, he said thoughtfully. I'll take my chances. Rick screamed, to himself, of course. He had come to Cygnus X1 to renew his immortality. It was way cheaper here than on Proxima Centauri, where he'd been killed last time. He loved money, which made life pleasant. And now he was losing that life. At least, he pleaded softly, don't kill me with the agonizer. Your sister died instantly. Don't torture me. And then, maybe, I won't be too zealous with my revenge. The boy examined Rick carefully, his eyes lingering on his neck with particular interest. He shook his head. Not sure I could strangle you. In the closet, on the second shelf, there's a plasma pistol, a Commando Hornet, officer's model. The money and the credit card are there too. The access code is Sierra 32 Tango. It's all yours. Just kill me with that. Fine. The boy, tucking the agonizer into his waistband, walked to the closet. Rick glanced at his left hand. The webbing had been poorly applied, catching only his fingertips. From his shoulder to the middle knuckles, his arm was free. How did you get into the hotel? Rick asked. He bit his lip until he tasted blood, until it hurt, and yanked his arm. The polymer thread indifferently claimed its victim, severing the last joints of 4 fingers. His thumb remained intact, a small victory. Said I was a boy for hire, the kid explained, carefully opening the closet. Paid the clerk, hey, there's only money here, no pistol. Here it is, Rick said, pulling his hand from under the pillow. Blood spurted from the stumps of his fingers in thin, pulsating streams. The ribbed barrel of the Hornet was shaking wildly. The boy turned, raising his own pistol, and froze, staring at the bloody fountains. I hate children, Rick whispered. Too bad I didn't notice your sister. I would have killed her deliberately. The stump of his index finger pressed the trigger. As the raw flesh touched the metal, a sharp jab of pain made Rick cry out. His hand trembled, and the thin red beam shot over the boy's shoulder. Now the boy screamed, either from fear or maybe Rick had grazed him after all. The boy ducked, and the agonizer blossomed into a cone of shimmering green light. The light harmonized surprisingly well with the splatters of blood. It's hard to miss with a loser's weapon. When the neural activator field touched Rick, he forgot about the pain in his hand. He became pain itself. It had happened before, but back then his Continuum had been paid for. And he could, at least, believe that he would get his revenge. Rick's scream was cut short after a second. He simply had no strength left for it. After a minute and a half of unbearable agony, he died. Blind, deaf, and sliced to pieces by the webbing he had been thrashing in. Death is the final adventure. There's nothing new in resurrection. It feels like ordinary waking. First, Rick saw light. Then a lumpy gray tower hanging over him, motionless, as if inanimate. Then again, the debate over whether the word life could be applied to silicates had been raging for hundreds of years. Name? A voice emanated from the gray surface. Ignoring the question, Rick sat up. The silicate didn't stop him. This race was generally reluctant to move, except when they were killing. The room was painfully familiar to him, a resuscitation module of the Continuum Corporation. But the screen on the wall, which usually displayed the planet's name, was dark. Rick was lying on a white disk 2 meters in diameter, a molecular assembler that had just recreated his body, brand new and healthy, just as it had been recorded 17 years ago. Above his head hung the delicate lattice of a continuum emitter, which had just poured into his new brain all the childhood grievances, youthful follies, and adult crimes, everything that made him Rick Harper. They had revived him. Revived him, even though the continuum wasn't paid for? Name, the silicate repeated patiently. Rick Harper. Citizenship? Commonwealth of Man. Code? The silicate's voice came from its entire surface. Lacking vocal cords, it spoke by tensing its silicon muscles, vibrating its whole body. This created a strange 3-dimensional sound, as if a whole choir was harmoniously whispering the words. 3, 9, 6, 3, 1, 4, 9, 1, Rick said quietly. It was best not to broadcast a personal code, even within the corporation that already knew it. He glanced at his left hand. The fingers were all there. Yes, he hadn't been patched up by surgeons. He had truly been revived. But why? Code correct. The silicate turned, a pure gesture of politeness, and floated toward the exit. Blue sparks crackled under the base of the gray column. It paused for a moment before the opening door, and Rick imagined the impossible, that the silicate was smiling. Is anyone going to explain to me what the hell is going on? Rick threw the rhetorical question into the void, studying the bas reliefs on the walls. Flowers, naked women, naked men. I will. Rick turned. Behind him, a couple of meters from the assembler disk, sat a man. That was something. Rick wasn't a racist, but having a heart-to-heart with a silicate was something he couldn't wrap his head around. And this man looked friendly. A man of 40 or 45, with a well-groomed face and a build that wasn't overly athletic. Even a loose gray suit couldn't hide it. A Continuum official? Not a low-level one, but not from the top brass either. Thanks for the new life, Rick said, swinging his legs off the disc. You're welcome. The words were ordinary, but Rick didn't like the tone. He decided to keep quiet. So, any questions? Rick faltered. Go on, go on. His companion was clearly enjoying the moment. You didn't pay for your continuum? I'm aware. I have money. I've renewed my immortality 6 times, But that doesn't matter. The corporation's rules are simple. Immortality is paid for in advance, and only for one use at a time. Do you know why? Rick shook his head. The man was the type who could discourse for hours on the subtleties of Ursid ceremonial cuisine or the tactical blunders of the Qatarians in the Great War. Such lectures were usually entertaining, but almost always out of place. When the architects sold humanity, very far-sighted humans, I must say, the device we named Continuum, they set only one condition. A very strange one, unless you know their psychology. They demanded that Continuum be granted only once in a lifetime. Do you understand, Rick? They value life immensely, but are terrified of immortality. And what did we do? Rick shrugged. We proved to them, after the contract was signed, that a resurrected person is a new individual, a legal successor to the previous one, but still new, and he has every right to enter into a new contract. Brilliant, isn't it? Stunning. Rick searched in vain for his clothes and prepared to wait. The man laughed. All right, I got sidetracked. What did you want to ask? Where am I? Is this Cygnus X1? No, not Cygnus. This is Earth. If he expected to see surprise on Rick's face, he wasn't disappointed. Rick saw no point in hiding his emotions if they could flatter the ego of someone more powerful. But the Continuum Corporation has no branches on Earth. This isn't a branch. This is a private continuum. Rick gave a strained laugh and spread his hands. Great. I didn't hear that, and you didn't say it. The corporation has exclusive rights. Private resurrectors don't exist. You're mistaken, Rick Harper. The exclusive right was transferred to a private individual, and that private individual founded the Continuum Corporation. I know who you are, Rick said. You're Julian Crane, the owner of the Continuum Corporation, the oldest man in the galaxy. Crane nodded. Well done, Rick. They'll bring you some clothes shortly, and we'll proceed to my summer office for a glass of wine. You're very lucky. You've received not only a life, but an excellent job. On the shores of Lake Geneva, in the jungles of the Amazon, in the radioactive deserts of the Baltics, in the swamps of China, in the Siberian taiga, everywhere were private domains, fenced off by the iridescent walls of force fields and the name of the Continuum Corporation. All these were parts of Crane's estate, connected into a single whole through wormhole conduits. If you somehow managed to peek behind the force barrier, you would only see strange fragments of buildings, with balustrades leading to nowhere and galleries growing straight out of the air. But from the inside, the picture was completely different. You would see the entire palace, born of a mad imagination and even madder money. After taking a funicular up the slope of Everest, one could ski straight into the crystal waters of Lake Baikal. After swimming 10 meters in the icy water of the Siberian lake, you could emerge on a scorching Cuban beach. And if, after such a stroll, the host invited you to his place, the journey to his Geneva Needle, a 300-meter tower, took only a minute. Rick stood on the open platform that crowned the building. The wind ruffled his hair, as if tempting him to experience the short joy of a free fall. Surely, an invisible field surrounded this open-air office, though, did Crane, the owner of infinite lives, fear falling? At this thought, Rick stepped back from the edge. He was needed by Crane for something, but his value could plummet right along with him. A good employee shouldn't get dizzy. Do you like the wine, Rick? Rick took a sip from his glass. Yes, Mr. Crane, it's a rare vintage, but I prefer the blue wines of the Kentarian Syndicate. Perhaps you're right, but the yellow varieties are much healthier. They aren't as hard on the liver, and they prolong life. It sounded like a mockery, but Rick remained silent. He swirled the antique crystal glass in his hand, which probably cost no less than immortality, and looked at Crane. The owner of Continuum sat at a simple wooden table with a similar glass in his hand. There was only one chair on the platform, either a calculated bit of nonchalance, or no one was ever honored to sit beside Crane at the pinnacle of his empire. "How do you like the view?" Crane inquired. "It's making my head spin," Rick muttered. "I prefer to look at the horizon." "A kaleidoscope, right?" Crane laughed. "I understand. Deserts, lakes, oceans, forests, steppes, and all on such a small piece of land. I don't need much, Rick. I don't need the whole Red Sea or all of the Himalayas, though I could buy them. A little bit of everything. Moderation and variety. That's the key to maintaining interest in a long life. You don't understand that yet, young man. You've been resurrected 6 times, not counting today. But your continuum never lasted you more than 5 years. Wasteful. Even with your qualifications and income, that won't last long." "What do you want, Mr. Crane?" Rick asked wearily. "A gifted life isn't worth a lecture." "I need you to die for me, permanently, irrevocably, or to gain eternal life, whichever way it turns out. Far from Earth, far from Cygnus X1, where you were killed, Rick." Crane stood at the very edge of the platform, looking down. Below, a slice of ocean was visible, a dark comb of forest, and a patch of night squeezed between them. A planet called Sanctuary. Never heard of it. Not surprising. A new, barely developed world. My interests require me to be there in person. Crane suddenly spat into the void. Rick suppressed a smile. The gesture was completely at odds with the image of the master of Continuum. "It's good that you're not laughing, Rick. What you've already heard is a top secret, and I'll have to tell you more and entrust you with much more. I'm taking a risk." Turning to Rick, Crane squeezed his shoulder. "Do you know what it means to be the most powerful man in the galaxy? Billions hate me. Those who can't afford Continuum. Those who went broke paying for it. Those for whom this residence is a thorn in their side. Billions of hateful eyes. Millions of hateful hands. I pay not only for protection from assassins. I maintain an entire staff for psychological defense against ill-wishers who might, without knowing it, possess psi abilities. Outside of this place, outside of Earth, they won't just kill me, oh no, they will torture me for years until I go insane, until I turn into a drooling idiot. And no Continuum will help. But still, I'm willing to risk it." "You need a bodyguard?" Rick asked, not believing his ears. "Not that simple. If I disappear from here for even a day, they will know immediately. Competitors, enemies, 100 mice will devour a cat, and I am a very, very fat and lazy cat. I'll have to take a risk and entrust this matter to my son. And you, Rick Harper, a professional bodyguard, will accompany him." "I agree, if my consent means anything," Rick said. "A job is a job, even if it carries more risk than usual. You could have just hired me." "Really? So that everyone would find out? Anyone who enters these walls becomes the object of close scrutiny by dozens of influential corporations and governments. And anyone who leaves, even more so. But you got here, let's say, virtually, and you will leave this place the same way." "I see." Rick forced a smile. "Hopefully painlessly?" "Well, far less painful than an agonizer. According to the Cygnus police report, that's what they killed you with, wasn't it?" Rick said nothing. "I waited a long time, Rick. I had about 100 people on my list. Experienced pilots, bodyguards, hired killers. I needed one of them to die without having paid for their Continuum extension. You know that the neural network in your head is always working. Whether you've paid for a new contract or not, it will do its duty. It will send a full report of an extinguished life out into space. It's up to the corporation whether to erase that signal or copy it into a brand new body. You didn't renew your immortality, and at the regional office, the signal was erased. Your body matrix was erased too. But I, in my private resuscitator, the only one in the entire Commonwealth, decided otherwise. And I brought you back to life, my hapless young friend. Officially, you no longer exist, but you are standing before me." "Thank you," Rick said sincerely. "Don't thank me yet. You will work off every muscle I gave you, every gland, and even the shit in your intestines that had to be recreated for the full set. If you deliver my son to Sanctuary, then, in addition to new documents and a very nice bank account, you will receive the grand prize. Immortality, Rick! No matter how many times you are killed, your Continuum will be paid for by the corporation. A fair price? Fair enough. I like your brevity, Rick. I'm an old man, although my body is only 50. I have the right to be talkative. And you are young and capable of much, in time. So, I would like to provide you with a new body. But experience shows you would be ineffective in it. We'll have to take a risk. Tonight, all branches of the corporation will receive the matrices of 3 people, Mr. and Mrs. Shaw and their son. The 3 of us are going? No, only you and Aiden will be in the crash. You're a freelance trader knocking around the frontier. You crashed your ship, obviously due to sabotage. All of this will be staged. There's an excellent simulator in the building. You see, viewing a client's memory is forbidden, but there are always curious experts. I hope they won't dig further than 2 or 3 hours from the moment of your death. And did you view my memory? Rick, Crane threw up his hands. Perhaps you don't understand this, but he who sets the rules must play by them himself. Viewing memory is forbidden. If a rank-and-file employee finds out that Julian Crane occasionally breaks his own laws, my reputation, my empire, it will all collapse. Besides, Rick, I don't give a damn which whore or which robber caught you in a moment of weakness. I'm familiar with your file. 4 times you died shielding a client, once in a completely hopeless battle, and once by falling into a river drunk. I was pushed, Crane. Whatever. I hope the price of the contract will force you to be focused and forget about the small joys of life for the sake of life itself. Of course, Mr. Crane. So you will be revived. I don't know where, Rick, for your own safety. There's a 12% chance they are watching us even here. Rick looked up at the cloudless sky. Young man, there are so many screens above us that there's practically no difference between the basement and the roof. So you will be revived. You'll buy a ship. Your credit will be limited. Otherwise, it would arouse suspicion. But don't think me a miser. As you spend the funds, new amounts will be deposited into the account. Next, sanctuary. After dropping my son off in any safe place, you are free to do whatever you want, and he will attend to our family business. Sounds simple, Mr. Crane. Only simplicity ever wins, Rick. Then let's talk guarantees. Crane frowned. Where's the guarantee my continuum will be renewed? Where's the guarantee that after breathing the air of your precious sanctuary, Crane Jr. won't put a beam in the back of my head? Where's the guarantee that a dozen hitmen won't be sent to clean up Rick Harper, who learned too much? Well, 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 Crane smacked his lips like an old man. He walked along the edge of the platform and said with regret, "You're taking a big risk, Rick." "It's my profession." For a second, Crane studied him. Rick, fighting the urge to look away, stared right into his face. Finally, Crane laughed. "A profession, you say? And you judge my profession, running a galactic corporation based on movies? Do you know that almost 200 years ago, when my company was nothing more than an amusing novelty, my worst enemy bought Continuum, and soon after, he died in an unexpected catastrophe. Back then, clients were few. People just didn't trust us yet. And in a world after the Battle of 1,000 Suns, the price of life seemed too high. I personally supervised the resurrection process. I could have. Yes, I could have." Crane fell silent, staring at something very far away. "We remained enemies for many more years, Rick. He never forgot to renew his continuum. In the end, I bankrupted him. Then Marcos terminated his contract with the company, took his yacht, and set a course for the nearest star. It could have been a gesture of despair," Rick said very softly. "You're no fool. A gesture? Of course. But remember, among all the mud they sling at me every hour on every info network, have there ever been accusations of business dishonesty?" Rick shook his head. "People work for me not just for money or even for their lives. They work for me out of conviction. I don't betray my own. All right. Rick suddenly felt tired of the argument. Last question. How do you guarantee my integrity? Integrity? Elementary. The neural network in your brain. If you betray me, then sooner or later, no matter what hole you're hiding in, death will find you. And you will be revived, believe me, right in this house. And by then, I will have already summoned the best torturers money can buy. You will torture forever, Rick. It will be your personal hell. Hundreds, thousands of years of torture. Pain will become your air, your food, your sleep. You will die and be reborn for even greater pain. They will give you respite, only for the agony to wash over you with new force. I will gather writers to invent new torments and directors to turn them into a spectacle. I will fetch sadists from labor camps and cannibals from asylums. I will turn to other races for help, and they will dig up archives from the times of their wars with humans. And sometimes you will be brought here, to the quietest place in my house, and I will remind you of this conversation. Julian Crane, master of life and death, stood before Rick Harper from the planet Ethel, an adventurer with no family or name, and spoke, very calmly and deliberately. When he finished, Rick spread his hands. "You're persuasive, Mr. Crane. I'm yours forever." "I never doubted it for a minute." Crane shrugged. "It's cold, Rick. Let's go to the office. The last thing we need is to catch a cold." The floor beneath them obediently descended. They floated in a black capsule of a force field, and Crane curiously studied the man to whom he had just promised the greatest reward and the most terrible torments since the dawn of time. He was a god, the strange god of the commonwealth of man, who had been given the right to punish and pardon, to kill and bring back to life. A god who was afraid to take a step from his man-made Olympus. "Does your son know how to fly small interstellar ships?" Rick asked, seemingly having already forgotten their recent conversation. "Not just small ones." "Weapons?" "He's decent with handhelds, good with ship-based systems, worse with melee, all those vibroblades and other exotic stuff." "Physically fit?" Crane grunted briefly and patted his soft belly. "Unlike me, I'd say he's in excellent shape for his age." "Well, that's tolerable." Rick looked up. "How old is he, Crane?" "He was born 16 years ago," Crane began in a honeyed tone. Rick winced, but his expression was more one of relief than displeasure. "But biologically, he's a little over 12. "What is it that you don't like, Rick?" Crane paced the office. Either for contrast with the office on the roof, or for some other reason, this one was very small. 5 by 5 meters, a desk with a chair, and a small sofa. Rick was sprawled on the sofa, while the host couldn't stay seated. A father with a young son? Hardly the most suspicious pair. You fly to sanctuary in search of new goods, drugs, or exotic animals? What's the problem? Crane, I'm telling you again, I've never had to work with children. I just don't like them. I know that. And about the shelter on Athel, your whole gang of kids evacuated from the TriStar system before the Scourge landing? The customs, the grudges. The only thing I don't know is which of your peers forced you into intimacy and which just dunked your head in the toilet. I know you were the weakest. You put up with it for a long time. Then you slit a couple of your tormentors' throats one night and ran away, joined a traveling circus. Rick froze. He had just been unlucky. He ended up in a block with kids from Pollux, one of the 3 inhabited planets in the Cassiopeia sector. A clerical error. Castor and Pollux had been at odds for many years, right up until the day the Scourge, hungry for living space, forced humanity to unite. The adults made peace. Adults flew combat ships together, worked in factories together, died in landings together. For the children, only one war remained, the one with each other. He didn't notice he had stood up, blocking the path of Crane, who was thinking aloud. Of course, after those sad years, humane treatment from adults affected your psyche. A good psychiatrist could have helped. Crane, he grabbed his employer by the lapels of his suit. Even the fact that you're a god, or the devil, even your crappy Continuum, bought from the naive architects, even the promised thousands of years in hell, you have no right to dig through my life. Crane looked with bewilderment at Rick's hand, which was lifting him off the floor. He furrowed his brows, raising his gaze. "I'm sorry, Rick," he said, his voice suddenly trembling. "For too long, you were an abstraction to me, one of the candidates for the greatest undertaking in history. I couldn't help but thoroughly study those to whom I was going to entrust the fate of my son and many secrets. It's natural, Rick, but I was harsh. I forgot that you were here, that I would cause you pain. Please, forgive me." "I think I understand how you got so far," Rick whispered, releasing his grip. Only then did it dawn on him what he had done. He had raised a hand to a god, and the god had apologized. "I hope you can manage your emotions." Crane sat on the sofa, gesturing for Rick to sit beside him. "My son is not one of those thugs. He's a child. He's 16, Rick. He's biologically 12. When I return to this body, a 30-year-old body, I feel how the world changes. The psyche is just an accidental growth on the glands. Your son hasn't lost his knowledge, but he's no longer a young man. He's a boy again, I'm sure of it. Why have you, the master of Continuum, scanned his matrix so rarely? Do you remember having your matrix scanned?" Rick winced. 3% of people interrupt the process and refuse Continuum. They refuse immortality, Rick, knowing they only have to endure it once. Half of my engineers are struggling with the problem of painless molecular scanning. For 200 years, no results. I love my son. I scanned his body and implanted a neural network as soon as the doctors allowed it. I repeated the scan at 12. I didn't have the heart to make him go through it again. We agreed. At 18, he gets scanned, and that body becomes his baseline. No such luck. The ocean, Rick. He drowned. A cramp seized his leg, and at that moment, Rick thought that one could feel pity even for a god, even knowing that a god didn't need pity. Crane was again staring into nothingness, into the black lace of his long memory. Do you know how drowning victims revive, Rick? They cough, spitting up water that isn't there. They scratch their chests because their healthy lungs still ache. Crane, I'm very sorry, but is it wise to send a teenager? I have no one else to send, Rick. Servants can betray, friends even more so. My wife, she's the best wife money can buy. She's the ornament of any evening. She's a wonderful mother to Aiden. She even loves me, not my money, and knows what can be discussed and what can't. But she'll faint at the first gunshot, and half the men you meet will want to possess her. And you, well, you'd probably forget about the promised punishment and cuckold me? Crane burst out laughing. Get over it, Rick. Unfortunately, I only have one son. When you're immortal, you don't rush to have heirs. I can trust him, and he's capable of handling the mission. You have a big, sweet carrot and a very sturdy stick. Do we have a deal? What are the other details? You'll have 3 days. You'll study the legend, get into character. You'll train a bit. My instructors know a lot of fun tricks. You bring Aiden to Sanctuary, and we're friends forever. And if we're intercepted by your numerous enemies, then, Rick, you will demonstrate all your talents. If they prove insufficient, you will kill my son, as painlessly as you can. He must not fall into enemy hands. Rick looked at Crane and said, I guess I'll take the job. And what will happen to me if I die? That will depend entirely on my son's account. Rick slept surprisingly well. The enfilade of rooms placed at his disposal was endless, and he couldn't be bothered to look for the bedroom with the promised gravity bed. The sofa in the library suited him just fine, and the fruit from the crystal vase served as breakfast. For the second time in his life, he tried a finicky earth fruit, plums, and decided they were quite edible. A silicate, likely the same one present at his resurrection, brought a tray with breakfast. Rick supplemented his fruit diet with a cup of coffee and asked, "I was promised an instructor. Is that you by any chance?" The gray stone pillar ignored the irony. "Follow me. The instructor is waiting for you." Either Crane was a fan of walking, or the silicate didn't see the need to use the internal transport. They walked through deserted corridors, occasionally stepping out into the open air. Through a nocturnal jungle where the sharp cry of some bird tried in vain to break the silence, they emerged onto a sunset-drenched ocean shore. The silicate floated above the surf line, and splashes of water hissed as they hit its stone body. Rick, having taken off his shoes, trudged along behind. A blond boy playing with a ball by the water watched them pass. "Crane Jr.?" Rick asked the silicate. "No." The ocean ended at a living hedge. The silicate stopped at a gate and said, "You will go on alone from here. I must not see your instructor. We are in a state of war." Rick ran through everything he knew about silicates in his mind and nodded. "Excellent. I'll go alone. Can you answer my questions?" "Sometimes." "Why do you serve Crane?" "Silicates do not serve." "Exactly. So why?" "I am repaying a debt." "Ah, I see." The gray cower waited patiently. "Can you tell me anything about Crane?" "What?" "Anything." A ripple ran across the lumpy stone, and an unseen choir whispered, "He is like his house." "Not very cheerful, is it?" Rick smirked, opening the gate. "Thanks, Rockhead." He stepped onto the sand. Yellow sand stretched to the horizon, where the night streets of Geneva shone through the rainbow haze of the barrier. Here, the sun was at its zenith, and beads of sweat formed on Rick's forehead. Though it wasn't just the heat. He saw the instructor. The Ursids were one of the most powerful and dangerous races in non-human space. Outwardly, they resembled 2-meter-tall bears, except no bear could boast such quick reflexes, fur as strong as steel wire, and a fully developed intellect. This Ursid was old. His dark brown fur had faded and curled into harmless ringlets. The teeth in his maw, bared in a greeting, were worn down to half their length. "Hello, Rick. Put on the armor. Are you ready?" His voice was surprisingly melodic and gentle, a random quirk of evolution that had so often misled humans in the era of first contacts. The armor lay on the sand nearby, dark blue, rough scales forming strange, soft shapes. Lightweight plastic armor for hand-to-hand combat. The muscle enhancers had been removed, but the medical unit blinked with a green light of readiness. "What's your name, old man?" Rick asked, snapping the armor connectors shut. The Ursid clicked his teeth. "My name is not for you. I am your instructor. Human Rick, do you value your body? It needs to last for 3 days." Rick fastened the last segments of armor and took a fighting stance. "I'm ready, Ursid." A blow to the stomach sent him flying back to the hedge. The med unit in the armor shrieked, pumping Rick full of stimulants and painkillers. "This blow does not kill immediately," the Ursid explained, approaching him. "In a week or 2, your liver will fail. An unpleasant surprise for the human prisoners we used to release in the old days." As he got up, Rick kicked the Ursid in the groin. The fur softened the blow. His leg throbbed, but the Ursid staggered back. "And we used to just castrate prisoners," Rick informed him, "or sterilize entire planets, right?" "I was on a planet that the Reaper passed over," the instructor said. "Your blow is painful, but not very effective." Rick dodged the next blow. The Ursid circled him, kicking up sand with its clawed paws. Then, suddenly dropping to all fours, it lunged at Rick. Leaping, Rick flew over the open maw. He straddled the huge body, struck its sides. Ursid anatomy was similar to human, and kidneys were a weak spot for all races, and somersaulted into the sand. The Ursid straightened up. He ran his paws over his sides, and calmly asked, "Usually humans do not entertain the thought that a sentient race can attack on all fours. You look young. Did you fight against us? I like watching old newsreels. Your imperfect vision simplifies information recording." The Ursid made a grunting sound. "Why did you win that war? You are weaker than us and dumber than the architects. You are average. We're average in everything. Yes, it's a shame that mediocrity rules the galaxy." This attack caught Rick by surprise. Pinned to the sand by a 200-kilogram mass, he couldn't even move. The Ursid's jaws opened, washing over Rick with a strange, unexpectedly pleasant smell, and moved toward his throat. A faint beep sounded the moment Rick felt the touch of fangs. The Ursid roared, pulling its maw back. He raised his right paw. Through the fur, a very ordinary human watch gleamed. "You're lucky, human," he said, lowering his voice. "You lasted 5 minutes in a no-rules fight. Now I have no right to kill you." With unearthly grace, he rose. Rick lay there, looking at his would-be executioner. "Get up, Rick. Now I will teach you how a human can kill an Ursid. And remember, this knowledge is given only to you. Can I ask a question? Speak. Why does your breath smell so pleasant? Don't you prefer stale meat? It's deodorant, you idiot. Any intelligent race maintains hygiene." Logical. Rick stood up. The med unit was still working, but his body ached. "All right, explain how to kill you." "The most vulnerable area of our race is the sigmoid gland region," the Ursid began in a muffled voice. "If you draw an imaginary line from my genitals to my right eye, exactly in the middle of that line will be an area unprotected by muscles." Crane invited Rick to dinner. After listening to the silicate's brief instructions on etiquette, Rick winced and rose from the armchair. Ignoring the motionless stone monolith, he undressed. He looked at himself grimly in the mirror. The armor didn't protect against bruises and contusions, and certainly not from a blow to the liver, if the instructor was to be believed. "Ursids are the best fighters in the galaxy," the silicate stated flatly. "Better than you?" Rick touched his shoulder and let out a soft cry. "Probably. They found a way to kill us in hand-to-hand combat." "Oh yeah? And what's that?" Rick asked, interested. "I wouldn't say, even if I knew. I'll have to ask. Lie on the floor." Rick looked at the silicate in surprise, but didn't argue. He stretched out on the thin, slightly dusty carpet, and the silicate slowly hovered over him. A heavy wave passed through his body. "Gravitational massage," the silicate explained unnecessarily, swaying. "You'll feel better. We can do more than just kill with our field." The bodyguard from the planet Aethel didn't suffer from unpleasant memories, but for some reason he remembered the spaceport on Cygnus X1 and the bloody stain 50 meters from the ship. "The little vermin are always getting under the jets." "Thanks, that's better." Rick rolled out from under the silicate. "Will Crane Jr. be at dinner?" "Probably." Rick got dressed. An expensive suit, a wide, shimmering tie, utterly non-functional shoes made of stiff leather, and followed the silicate. He felt a slight curiosity mixed with annoyance. As always, before meeting a client he couldn't refuse. Damn it, a professional should have the right to choose. "Do you have a desire to ask questions?" "What? Oh, yeah, sure. Do you wear clothes?" "I am clothed," the silicate answered with dignity. Rick choked but managed to hold back his laughter. "Now it's my turn." The silicate slowed its pace, drawing level with Rick. If humans gain great power, what will they do?" "I don't understand," Rick answered honestly. They left the tower and headed toward a small round pavilion in the distance. Along the way, they had to cross a pine grove, past some silly stones arranged in a circle, and a tiny Gladius-class corvette from the Great War era fused into a granite pedestal. Let me rephrase. If the power of the Commonwealth of Man increases immeasurably, how will humanity's policy change? We'll stop paying attention to other races. We'll stop considering them. Would you do otherwise? The silicate remained silent. Then, swaying toward the corvette, it said, "During the Great War, Julian Crane served in the Free Hunter units. They had no regulations, no orders, and no strategic objectives. We never figured out how to fight an unorganized enemy." "Crane is a brave man," Rick said loudly. "I agree, but many say his little ship is very well preserved. The engines are worn out, but the armor is intact. The most curious thing is that Julian Crane returned from his last flight with a non-functioning onboard computer. We have arrived. I do not consume organic food, but I wish you pleasant taste sensations and successful digestion." Gracefully describing a semicircle, the silicate flew back. Rick stood for a moment, looking at Crane's ancient ship, then opened the door to the pavilion. He had an organic body that needed food, and an excellent appetite, awakened by his training with the Ursid. Inside, the wooden pavilion turned out to be a stone castle. The huge hall reminded Rick of the churches of the One Will, where he was taken as a child, and it evoked a vague feeling of awe and dislike. His feet got tangled in the dry reeds that covered the floor. The vaulted ceiling turned the rustling of the reeds and the sound of his footsteps into a steady hum. Julian Crane sat at a round table, vigorously carving a piece of roasted meat. Seeing Rick, he half rose. "Have a seat, Rick. In honor of your morning exploits, we're having bear meat for dinner." Rick couldn't help but smile and sat down at the table. He had no doubt that Crane had been watching the training. He was only curious whether the Ursid had a timer on his wrist or if it was Crane himself who gave the signal that prevented bloodshed. "Did you like the instructor?" "I never would have thought Ursids could die of pleasure." "The sigmoid gland?" "Yes, they die in ecstasy, if you have the strength to pierce their hide." "Hormones, hormones." "The old bear didn't tell you, but his gland is covered not just by fat, but also by an implanted titanium plate. Otherwise, one of his students would have finished him off long ago. And how he loves that blow to the liver. It's his invention, and God knows how many human prisoners died while he was honing his craft. Pour yourself some wine, Rick." Looking at the bottle of pale blue liquid, Rick shook his head. "Allow me to pour from yours, Crane. I've started to be more careful with my liver." "As you wish, Rick." Taking a sip of the viscous yellow wine, Rick nodded. Yes, it was a good vintage. "Crane, is your trainer really that old?" "The Ursid? Yes, he fought in the Great War." "He's my age. Their religion forbids them from using the Continuum, but that race lives quite a long time even without it."